there are two different ways that you can tie knots in pearls, crystals, any type of bead that you want to use. It's handy to have special tools for that. And the way that you get started is by using some different materials. I have here some nylon cord. This is size 6, and the way you choose your cording is depending on the size beads you're using. So I'm using 8mm beads. These are pretty big, and we're going to be able to pass this twice through the first 3 beads. I'm also using some French wire. Now this is a very small coil of wire that's going to cover the end of the cording where it meets the clasp. And then I also have a pretty clasp that I'll be using and some pearls. Of course, you could, like I mentioned, you could use any type of bead. So the way that you get started with any strand, regardless of what type of tool you're using to tie the knots, is that you'll want to pick up your 3 beads and then pass through your French wire. And you just place it over your needle, and when you work with silk or nylon cord, the needle is attached, so that makes it really easy to start knotting. And I'm using a shorter piece of cording, but it's recommended that you usually start at the very end of your cord. And you'll definitely want to stretch your cording out because it is a little bit kinked from being sold on a card, so you can remove any of those creases that would prevent your knots from being tight and consistent. So here, I'm just folding it through. Except I forgot my clasp. So go back and pick it up. Pass through our loop, and then through our first bead. And this piece of French wire here is going to protect it at the clasp when I pull through my pearl here. And there's a little loop. Goes right through here, and then we're going to tie the first knot by hand. So we'll tie just one, it's around, and then go through our first pearl. And then we're going to come through the next one again, and then we're ready to start knotting fast. So this one comes through, and you always start out by passing through those first few beads twice. Tie another knot, and then come through our third, and then we'll be ready to add more pearls. So pull our needle through, and then here we go. So this is how you get started here. This is for starting any strand. You've got your clasp, you have your French wire, and your first 3 beads that are knotted together. Now, at this point, you're going to start stringing all of the rest of your beads. So I'm just going to string a few on here so that you can see how to get started with your knotting process on each of these different types of tools. These guys are very lustrous because they're crystal, and they have that pearl coating over the top of the bead that makes them look really like you've got some high-end pearls going on. So now what you're going to do with the hand tool is always bring the cording around 2 fingers, turn your fingers over, drop the beads through the loop. Then bring this to the front of your fingers, place your tool through the loop, and pull straight up. Now notice I'm catching the end of the tool here with my finger so that I can place this through the yoke without releasing the knot off the end of the tool. Now I'm pulling very tight. I'm going to press up with my thumb, and the knot will be released. Just like that. And we'll do another one. Drop it through, and then place the awl through the loop, and then pull straight up, bring it through the yoke, and then release the knot. And you can see how quickly you could get to the end of your bracelet by using this hand knotting method with the hand tool. Now with the tabletop method, it's a little bit different because you have the awl here, so it's on the front of your tool. What you're going to do is bring a bead down, drop it through this hole, and then bring it through the loop, drop it through here, pull straight up. You want to make sure that these beads are positioned behind the awl. So when you pull straight up and you bring this through the yoke, now I'm pulling gently here, and I'm going to just release the knot by pulling on this lever. So you can make your knots very even and consistent, and this allows you to work with both hands rather than just with your fingers on one hand. So dropping it through, wrapping it around, dropping it through the loop, placing the pearls behind, pulling it up, bringing it through the yoke, and then releasing here with the lever. So you can see our strand is starting to come together. Got one more bead on here. And you know, when you get to the end, then we're going to do the same process again, where we bring, I'm just going to pull here, release, and you could continue beading the rest of the way. Now we're going to pretend that this one is completed and we're ready to finish up at the other end. And it's basically the same process. We're just going to take our 3 beads that are not knotted yet and string them on to our bracelet. Then we're going to pass through our French wire again, and then through the other end of the clasp. And the reason I'm going over this part of beginning and finishing the bracelet is because we so very often talk about knotting, but we don't talk about how to finish our pieces. So I wanted to make sure that we go over the process for beginning and finishing the knotted strand. So your clasp here is going over the French wire and then passing this needle back through our last bead. And the tricky part about finishing is that you have to leave a little bit of extra space in between those last few pearls, because that's where you're going to add your own knots. So this would be way too much space right here. I have to really snug this a lot closer together, but not too tight, because I need to have enough space to make my last 2 knots right in between here. So that looks like about the right amount of space. So now I'm just going to pull my French wire the rest of the way down so that I can get my clasp there. Now I have room to make my 2 hand knots. And this time I'm just going to wrap around the strand, come through the loop, and I'm using my finger to create that loop there for the knot. Then I'm pulling this tight all the way down between the pearls to seat it. Then we're going to press the needle through the other bead and pull it out the other side. So it can be handy to keep some pliers around if you need to grasp this needle here, because you can see it is a really thin needle. So let's get this all straightened out here so you can see what's happening. This is our first end with a clasp. Now we're making our second knot. We've pulled it through here. I'm going to pull this very tightly and create my last knot in between those last beads. So I'm just going to pull it around and then tie my knot through that loop. Then I'm going to add a little bit of jeweler's cement.